Hello, this is Debbie, and this is Light Up Your Worth. I am so excited to bring you today's guest, Linda Zurak. Linda is a trauma-informed somatic movement educator, therapist, and embodiment teacher that inspires people to live beyond their perceived limitations. She has spent 25 years exploring mental, physical, and emotional blocks that keep us from fully experiencing our power, passion, and pleasure. Through her own experiences of loss, relationship struggles, birth, and religious trauma, Linda has become an advocate for women finding their voice, becoming visible, and living their heartfelt truth without apology. Her passion is helping people feel more confident, vibrant, and free in their personal and professional relationships. She mentors movement teachers internationally. In her free time, you can find Linda playing with her sweet dog, Lily, or in her homeland of Croatia, preparing organic food and enjoying quality time with family and friends on the coast. In addition to her training in somatic therapy, she also has EFT, which is Emotional Freedom Technique, Grief Guide, IFS, Internal Family Systems, CK, Compassion Key, and one of my ultimate favorites, NLP, Neuro-Logistics Programming. She's also a master Pilates teacher with qualifications in body rolling. Welcome, Linda.
Thank you. Hi, Demi. Good to be here for having me.
I'm excited to jump into it. You made a comment in the bio because Lily is famous here on Light Up Your Worth. I have
I
my
didn't know that.
dog that I talk about frequently, and her name is Lily. Tell me about Lily.
Lily is a Maltese poodle mix, and she's 4 years old. And she's a dog that thinks she's a cat.
Oh,
So she's very cat-like in her demeanor. She's not an average dog. She doesn't like to go in the mud. She doesn't like long walks. She just wants to snuggle and be touched and massaged. And occasionally she'll go out for a walk.
uh-huh. Oh my gosh. She sounds like a dream little fur baby.
She's a real fur baby, and she can be a little anxious. She has a lot of interesting qualities like her mom and dad.
I definitely believe they pick up our qualities.
Absolutely. It's
They pick up our
incredible.
energy.
She's very sensitive, sweet, and loving, and adorable. Hey, how's your Lily?
My Lily is almost 12-year-old
Oh,
Pitty,
wow.
and she
Okay.
doesn't have the typical Pitty big head. She's a smaller size, about 40, 45 pounds, and she's the senior now. When I first started, she used to do Zoomies and want to
Oh,
talk, and so she's under the table. She's been fed, and she now sleeps
right.
through the conversations.
That's right.
So, yeah, she's part of the Light Up Your Worth community.
Beautiful.
Yeah. So I'm going to jump in. I am really excited to hear more about the whole mental, physical, and emotional blocks um, perspective of
Mm,
a trauma-informed somatic movement, the educator, and how you wrap that around with therapists and an embodiment. Because,
mm.
we were talking before we hit record about a lot of us in the healing community go through, whether we're going through therapy or we're using spiritual healing modalities, the healing arts. And I think we have a tendency a lot of times to forget about our bodies
For sure.
in those healing practices. So I would love to hear what a trauma informed somatic movement educator is from your perspective, Linda.
Okay. It's a mouthful, right?
Yeah, it is.
I think to start, I want to say that I've been teaching movement for 25 years. So, specifically with Pilates and gyrotonic and gyrokinesis, those are all different movement modalities. And then what I recognized is when was working with clients, especially as a new teacher, I often was frustrated because I didn't understand why they weren't doing what I wanted them to do, or it seemed like they were ignoring me, or I couldn't get the results that I wanted. And I was confident enough in my education to know I wasn't a terrible teacher. So I couldn't figure out what was missing. And after many years of working through movement, I heard about somatic therapy, which I had known nothing about. And basically, it's a therapy that focuses on the body. So it's called a top up approach. So we're focusing on the body and working up towards the head and speaking rather than focusing on the mind and the head and speaking from that place. And when I did that training, what I recognized is like, oh, the reason those people, those Koreans weren't doing what I said is because A, they were either not in their bodies.
Mm.
And when I say that, obviously we're in our bodies because we're walking, we're talking. But the analogy I give is when you're driving your car and you don't remember how you got from point A to point B, you got home and you don't remember how you got home.
Hmm.
That would be a state of not being in your body, right? So your mind is somewhere else, or you're off in another thinking of something else, and you're not physically aware of where you are in space, what road you're going down. So we're a little bit disembodied, I could say.
Hmm.
And so what I recognized is, okay, so when people are in that disembodied state or they're elsewhere in their mind and I'm trying to connect with their body, it doesn't work. And so I might be speaking, but they can't hear me. It's not that they're not listening or ignoring me, but they're all somewhere else.
That
And
makes
so
complete sense. Mm.
I think we all know that experience. Or another example is they're in the gym and they're on the treadmill and they're reading the paper or they're watching TV.
Hmm.
So in that moment, their head is split off from their body.
Yes. Yes.
And it's so
I see
common.
that with my clients when
Yeah,
we go to do the energetic healing. I do a very long version of what's called heart of creation. And it's basically to bring people back into and connect with their own heart
beautiful.
so that they're in the body. So
Yeah.
I've witnessed
Yeah.
that myself. And I'm sure everybody can relate to your
Mm,
examples of how did you
mm.
get home?
I don't know. And we walk around as though we're just a head, like we walk around in this head bubble and we often communicate from the head bubble and we do our maybe spiritual work from the head bubble. And so there's not a lot connecting below the neck.
Hmm.
And the reason I would say that's important is because it's in our body that our nervous system is, our intuition is in our body, or any kind of traumatic events that we've experienced are stored in the body. So
Hmm.
there's a way that the mind can forget events and have no recollection of something having happened. But when the body moves, when I see somebody's body moving or I see them speaking, I can see the difference between what their head is saying and what their body is saying.
Just from observing them talking. Wow.
Sure, because there's a way that our bodies hold themselves. And there's a way that if you just, next time you go and have a coffee, you just simply watch people walking.
Hmm.
You'll start to notice how when people walk, there's often only parts of their bodies that move. Maybe they're only their arms move and their torso is like very rigid. If you start to bring your attention to that, it will become very
Oh,
obvious and really interesting. You'll say, whoa, that look at how that person walks. So some people walk with their head leading, some people walk with their pelvis leading. So all of those are indicative of some emotional state in their body and indicative of their history.
that is absolutely fascinating. Now I want to go, people, what?
When I first started, the first time I went out with my friend, she was a somatic therapist, and I was single at the time. And we were out having a drink somewhere. And I said, oh, look at that guy. He's so attractive. And she said, oh, no, you don't want to go out with him. I said, why not? She said, he's totally overbearing. I said, how do you know that? She said, I can read it in his body.
Oh,
So I thought, okay, that I have to learn.
yes. Yes. You can see what the somatic, then how does the embodiment come into it then?
Great question. Great question. Let's see, the easiest way I can describe it is when you've had a traumatic event, there's a way that you disconnect from a part of your body. So, for example, let's say you had your first heartbreak when you were a teenager, you were 14. So, obviously, heartbreak is a lot of emotion in the heart.
Mhm.
And probably we've experienced heartbreak much earlier than 14, the first time that your dad doesn't give you a hug when he comes in the door, or you don't get the lollipop that you want. So what happens is every time that happens, there comes like a hardening or a protection around that part of the body. The quickest way to do it is by holding our breath or making our breath more shallow. That stops emotion. And then we just disconnect from that part of our body because we don't want to feel that pain.
Oh, is that why you hear if you're in a yoga class where they really want you to take deep breaths because they say
Hmm.
we all breathe so shallow?
Yes, yes. And that's what I also learned when I was teaching clients and I was frustrated because they wouldn't breathe. Now I recognize, the reason they don't breathe is because subconsciously they know if they take a big breath, it's going to bring up something. It's like shaking up the snow globe. It's amazing,
Wow, that is really intriguing. Okay, tell me
right?
more.
So then what happened is instead of telling people what to do in a class or in an individual session,
Mhm.
that's really directional language. It's okay, breathe and breathe more and do this and do that. I started to change my language and make it more invitational, which is a trauma informed approach. So that means instead of saying, okay, breathe and take a deeper breath, I could say, if it feels right for you, see if you can take a little bit deeper breath or explore how deep can your breath be. So I'm inviting them to explore something rather than
Mhm.
telling them what to do.
Yeah, you can even feel like energetically when you said those 2 words, like it just felt I
Yes.
could feel my body responding more to what you just said versus take a deep breath. I was like, "Oh,
Yeah.
even here,
It's
just talk."
incredible. You're so attuned to your body. And that's happening all the time that our body is responding to our environment, to the words, to the people, to the energy, to our surroundings. It's happening all the time. We're just not versed in having our awareness there.
Mhm.
So that applies to in all areas of life, whether you're at work. So if I'm working with a client, I have to be not only aware of what's happening in their body, but also aware of what's happening with me.
Mhm.
Because if I'm checked out and I'm just speaking my things that I always speak out of habitual rote, then I'm not going to be connected with what's happening with them energetically. And I'm not in my body. So it creates a disconnect in our field.
Hmm.
And the client can feel that. And then the session is a little, how would I call it? It's just a little dry and disconnected, and there's no depth. So we're always relating to each other.
Uh-huh. So, if somebody is new to anything that we've been talking about, the whole
Mm,
somatic or being in your body, or they're like, I think I'm in my body. How would I know I'm in my body? Do you have some
mm.
type of practice
Yes.
that somebody could do for themselves to maybe start becoming more familiar what it feels like versus I know when I'm not in my body.
And how do you know that?
I zone out.
Yeah.
I really zone out. And so I have to practice, like, even if I'm interested in it, or sometimes I used to think it was just that I was just distracted. And there's subtle differences that I can tell when I'm in my body versus when I'm not. It wasn't
Mm.
that I wasn't interested but for some reason, maybe I was floating
Exactly. Exactly.
around.
And I think the language, as soon as somebody says, I think I'm in my body, that's indicative of their thinking about being in their body, which is not the same as being in it because we're thinking about. And so the quickest way to come into your body is to come into your senses, right? Because the language of the body is sensation. So you could start with, for example, we're both sitting on a chair. My feet are barefoot because I'm always barefoot because I like to feel my feet on the floor. So I'm going to rub my feet on the floor. And as I do that, my attention goes to my feet. And then I might just shift my weight into one side of my bottom into the other side. And then that puts my attention into my pelvis, right? So that's my attention goes into the physical form. I might just squeeze my arms. And as I squeeze my arms, I feel the sensation of that. And you could do it as simply as rubbing two fingers together. Let's say I'm in a meeting, I'm not going to be rubbing my arms or shifting in my seat, but I might lean back in my chair and I feel my back against the chair. Because as soon as I do that, I feel my physicality in contact with another surface. So I would say at the basic level, because our bodies are our first boundary between us and the world.
Mhm.
When you think about it, if you think, okay, there's a spirit inhabiting this form, if I'm not aware of the form, then how do I know where I am in space? How do I know what's happening emotionally? How do I know how I'm responding to you?
Yeah. And it just got more calm
Mm,
because I was doing what you were talking about, even doing with my fans. And I thought, oh, was I floating a little bit? And I didn't even
yeah.
realize, like, maybe there was a tad of it, even though I'm very, I felt like I was very present
Yes. Yeah.
and engaged. And
And I love that you said that. So for me, it feels like I can feel it even when I do sessions online. It feels like there's a dropping down and in. So it's like you drop down and into yourself, and I drop down and into myself.
Mhm.
And then we're both in a more grounded place. And then how we relate is on a very different level. Now we can relate from the mind and the heart and the gut. How I listen and how I share is from those three places rather than the head bubble.
Head bubble. I like that expression.
And modern day life is just more and more encouraging us to be disembodied because the more we're on devices, and even now we're on a device. So all the more reason to focus on my physicality when we're in this medium, right? The more we're on technology, the more disembodied we are,
Mhm.
right? Because our focus is so external.
Yeah. Yeah. That is so true. And then we try to jump in and go to bed,
I know. And
like,
then we say, I don't know why I can't sleep.
right? And then I
So
think I just did my meditation on my phone
yeah, in my head.
in my head 10 minutes before the TV went off, or and even if it's
Yeah.
in the other room,
Yes.
it's still
Mm.
it going through. I had a friend tell me many years ago, after you're done with all of your electronics to end the day by going and touching not the inside, but on the outside of electrical where you would plug it in to
Okay.
disconnect yourself from
Oh,
the electrical currents.
interesting.
I've never really read anything about it ever since, but I
Mm.
thought in my spiritual communities, people do things that aren't necessarily found on the internet.
It's true. It's true. Yeah,
Just simple practices. One of the comments that you made was that when you were in the process of learning the somatic and the embodiment, when you were out, when you were single and you saw somebody and she knew exactly, that's not a good thing. And I think what was so interesting was that how these practices can help us with relationships. Because
absolutely.
I'm sure there are women who are listening to the podcast and our listeners who are more seasoned in life, or 40 plus is the majority
Yes.
of the listener base. And so there's going to be a good percentage of women who are single at this age in their 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s.
Mm, mm.
And you don't want to have a same partner that you might have had before.
Yeah.
I would love to hear how this work improves that. I call it the picker, right? The
Great. Yes,
picker,
great
or
name.
once you've picked somebody.
Absolutely. I can share my story. It was because of the embodiment and somatic work that I did that I'm able to have the relationship that I have now because my picker, we all have a picker that is set to what's familiar. So even if it's not good for you, even if your mind says, okay, I'm not going to date emotionally unavailable men anymore. I'm not going to date bad guys anymore. We know that. We know what we want. But then what happens is our nervous system is tuned to a certain channel. that connects to that vibration.
Mm.
So we can think our way into a different state, we can have affirmations, but again, we're only working on one level. Our body is responding to something that is familiar as, oh, yes, this is home. And it's all subconscious. It's not anything that we are aware of. It's so quick and it's so familiar. A lot of the work I do with people is knowing what your nervous system knows as the healthy relationship, not healthy, familiar,
Mhm.
right? And then playing with how do we turn that channel to different channels. So, for example, I often give my clients some play work, I call it. So instead of thinking about, okay, he has to be this age and look this way and have XYZ, I say, see if you can go home and just take some time. Sometimes we do a meditation together and close your eyes and imagine what you would like to feel like with this partner that you envision. How would you feel in your body? How would you feel as a woman? And really not as a conceptual idea, but really feel it in your physicality. And then what often happens, they'll either say, oh, I can't even imagine how I would feel, or they can't tolerate that feeling. So if I say, for example, I'd love to feel relaxed, cherished, and free, and then I go to embody that experience in my body because it's unfamiliar, I won't know how to do that.
Mm.
So if I've never felt cherished, how do I know to embody feeling cherished? So the reason that we practice that is then what you're doing is you're tuning your nervous system to a different channel so that when you're out and you go on a date, for example, when you're sitting across from the person, instead of being focused on them, which women are notoriously focused on, let's keep up the conversation. Let's be interested in him. Let's not let there be any gaps in the conversation. Instead of doing that, you can be sitting back and noticing how you feel in the presence of this person. And it will either match what you're meditating on or it won't.
If you are working on feeling cherished
Mm-hmm.
and you've never felt cherished, you're doing work in the subconscious through the meditations
Mm-hmm.
to help you understand so your body can start to recognize that. So you're actually be changing
Yes.
the neural pathways
Yes.
to
And then you would
recognize
start
the new feeling. Mhm.
exactly. And how you would start, like you're saying, if you've never had the experience of feeling cherished, you would have to start then questioning, okay, so how do I cherish myself? What can I do to give myself that experience? Because as you do that for yourself, the people out there can pick that up, right? Their picker will know that you're a woman who is cherished. So it works both ways.
Oh. It's like you give out some type of
A
innate
different signal. Yeah, it's a
signal,
different
like a
signal.
different scent or it
Mhm.
sounds so
Yes,
primitive, but I've
it
got
is.
I've read about that too, right? Like we give off
But
different.
we're energetic beings, right? So we're speaking
Mhm.
on about energy all the time, but we're not consciously saying, okay, so if I move in the energy of somebody who is cherished and adored and loved, if I move like that through my day and I dress like that and I go to work like that, how can I not attract that?
Mm,
It's impossible, right? Because the vibration won't match.
mhm,
So the work is first focusing on your experience, internal experience, right? Because I've had the experience of working with women who were stunning and the perfect size and the perfect everything, and they could not embody that internal experience. So we're so externally focused. And so what we're really doing is bringing the focus inward and so that we can use our spidey senses, right? To sense, okay, how am I feeling sitting here next to this person?
mhm,
Not by consciously saying we do these sometimes check boxes. Oh, yes, he's this. Or maybe we'll feel not so good with the person. And then we'll say, oh, don't be so awful. Give him another chance or give him another chance. You're so picky. We try to speak it away when
mhm.
already we felt on a level, something's off for me.
Yes, I've had that experience. I think I've spent most of my adult life because I was in a relationship from like 18 to like 38.
Wow.
And then I was single, did a little dating, but not many relationships. And so you start watching and observing others in their dating. And then
Yes.
when you're dating and realizing that, oh no, I definitely need to not date because I'm working through what I really want. But yet,
Mm-hmm. Of
common philosophy, mainstream, is just jump back out there with knowing
course.
that you're just going to keep attracting, it'll be a different package, but you're going to keep attracting the
Of
same
course.
type of person. But I didn't realize that it has to do with our nervous system about
Mhm.
what feels familiar.
Sure. So if you think about it, so for example, if I had a father who was emotionally unavailable or had a temper, then that will be familiar to me. And that, because that's my first blueprint of what men are and how I relate to him and how he relates to me sets my subconscious up for that's how I relate to men and they relate to me. So of course I'm going to attract those type of men into my life and that will be like, yes, this
Mhm.
is what I know. And maybe if I date somebody who's not that way, I might say, "Oh, they're a bit boring," or "Oh, they're so quiet." And I will feel uncomfortable in that dynamic, even though it might be healthier for me.
Uh-huh. Yes. Now, I know that as we get to these different seasons in our life, we're more seasoned, right? With
Yes.
relationships once we hit 40, I think especially after our 50s,
Yeah.
and we want to go out. And what if you do meet somebody who seems to be a nice person, but you do get a lot of pressure from fellow women about, well, you're in your 50s. You should just, he's a nice guy
Mhm. You should
and
just what? Settle.
settle, even though it may not be something that you can identify what it truly is. Now, how can you identify though for yourself if you're just knocking up against something that's familiar and maybe you're working on the new download, like the cherished download,
Mhm, mhm.
and maybe that just doesn't feel aligned versus that feeling of, I just don't know what it is.
Yes. Fair enough, and I would say part of it is knowing what your familiar is, and it doesn't mean that you can't go out with somebody like that, but because what it is and you know where you want to be now, you can do that work together.
Mm,
So if you attract somebody who's willing to journey with you, so let's say, okay, if I'm used to men shouting and yelling and I go into my freeze as a response, now I can have a conversation when we're connected and say, listen, I just want to ask you something. When you're upset, I go into freeze when I hear you shouting. So next time that happens, I'm going to leave the room because I want to take care of myself. Or if it's possible, I would ask you to not shout or to notice that you're shouting. So both people get to work on their automatic nervous system response and they can shift it together if you happen to be with somebody who is willing to do that with you.
mm.
So it can be very healing. So it doesn't mean you don't have to be with that person, but if you have the awareness of what your work is, so that is another reason why we attract the historical piece is so that we get to have a do-over in a way.
That is really great advice.
Thank you.
That is really great advice because I think we both believe in, obviously, with your work, that we store the traumas.
Hmm.
And I know we store a lot of in our subconscious before we're
Yeah.
7.
Yes.
And that's why there's so many programs globally to provide health, child service care, and
Hmm.
free daycare type of centers to help.
Yes.
And so I think that makes sense to people. But when you are very young, 2 or 3 and under, or an infant, you
Yes.
don't realize the impact it can have even if parents are disagreeing
Absolutely.
and how that goes into our subconscious. And so your work, does it also help with things that occurred while your mother was pregnant with you? Does your work
Well,
reach
it
out to
can
that?
do.
Mhm,
It can do because a lot of that is pre-verbal.
mhm,
So in somatic work, that's why it's so important because if somebody comes to me and their body is holding a trauma that occurred when they were either in utero, in the belly, or before they could speak, talk therapy is not going to help them, is it?
mm,
Because there's nothing to speak about. But in that instance, what needs to happen is we need to give the body some space to either show us something or release something. And how that happens is sometimes it can start with talking. So you might talk about the cognitive story that you know. And then as you speak about it, you might start to have some sensations in the body. Or sometimes when people speak, they'll make a gesture. And then what I'll do is I'll encourage them to make that gesture a little bit longer and maybe a little bit slower. And right away, what happens is that leads into something because that gesture is the body telling us something.
mm.
And
So
then we don't know what's going to happen and we don't need to know what it is. But then what might happen is the body can start to move. And in that movement, some emotions can come. And we don't need to know what they are because, again, it's pre-verbal. So
mhm.
we can't analyze it and we don't need to analyze it. We're just making space for whatever wants to come up to be freed.
Oh, so if a listener, or even including myself, when I was pregnant with my
Mm,
son, there was a lot of conflict with his father.
mm,
I always wondered about that. Even then, even though I had no idea about any of this stuff 35 years ago.
yes.
Oh my
Mm,
gosh, he's 34. So, but pregnant 35 years ago. And so had no idea, but you intuitively know that you don't want your
mm.
baby to be born to be part of it. But now knowing that, yeah, they actually do pick up some of that in their nervous
Yes,
system.
they do.
Mm,
So it's very individual. It's hard to say. For some people, we'll work together and that will be enough or it won't be enough. And if I feel like they need something additional, I might send them to somebody who does specific work on the nervous system, like with a physical touch.
mhm.
It depends. It depends on what kind of trauma they've experienced and how much freezing they have in their system. So, freezing looks like if you had a very traumatic experience, your body will go into a freeze and the tissue will stay frozen. And you can see that in people's bodies sometimes. They're really like rigid and they're a little bit like this, but their face is fine. And when they talk, they say, "Yeah, I'm fine." But there's such a holding and a freezing in their body that needs unwinding. And you can go to yoga and you can stretch, but it's not the same because you're doing something to your body versus making space for your body to do something.
That
It's
so
quite
would
different.
that behavior also be, if you've witnessed, where, because I see it a lot in my son's generation, especially,
Mhm.
where they feel very overwhelmed and they freeze too with action, like
Mhm.
much quicker than, say, my generation. I feel like I've seen it just a lot with younger people that I've worked with.
Mm,
They
mm.
just get overwhelmed, like their nervous systems are just more on edge.
And I think what I see for me, overwhelm, the image I give of overwhelm is like there's a tidal wave, and the tidal wave is about to crash over you, and the tidal wave is so big and you're so small.
Hmm,
So, how I play with that with people is that you have to make yourself bigger on the inside, and then you don't feel so overwhelmed because the overwhelming external is bigger than your internal world. And because we're so externally focused, and for sure it has to do with technology, right? Like we didn't have this exposure to technology. We didn't grow up like that. So the more in technology you are, your eyes are your social where you recognize and sense, am I safe? Am I safe? Am I in danger? So our social nervous system is in the eyes. And because our eyes are so overstimulated all the time, and much more so in the younger generation, it's not a surprise that they're overwhelmed and they have no sense of their internal world or they're inhabiting themselves because it's all externally focused. So it's like the more externally focused you are, the smaller you feel.
How can, whether it's our children or
Mm.
ourselves, when we feel that happening, what are some practical tips that you would offer?
I would say I give this often to people is that I have them make a little visor with their hands.
Mm,
And what you're doing is you're just narrowing your focus.
mm,
And just notice how that feels in your eyes. For me, it feels a little bit soothing
mhm,
and a little bit calming. And then you're just making a little bit like tunnel vision because
mhm.
in overwhelm, you're looking at too many things and you're thinking of too many things. So now you're narrowing your vision and you could say, what's the one thing that needs my attention now? The one thing, just the one, or the one thing I need to do, or the one. So it's going from this external, everything's so big, overwhelming, to bringing and narrowing the focus in.
I like that visual, physical movement
Yes.
of putting the little blinders on.
Yeah. And I really hug my face. I don't want to let any light in there. And it has a real calming effect on the
Mhm,
nervous system. And then it literally gives you that sense of tunnel vision in a
mhm.
way. So I think it's really quick and I do it myself when I have a lot going on and I don't know where to start and I start to feel that overwhelm. And then I just say, okay, let's bring the focus in. What's the one thing I need to do right now?
Your
And then you
next
can do that
best.
many times.
Mhm.
Yeah, one step.
Yes, that's a great
And then,
practical tip.
yeah, coming back to your physicality. Okay, I'm here. So it has to do with where our attention and energy is going. So when we're externally focused, our energy is dispersed, right? It's in a million directions.
Mhm,
And so what we want to do sometimes I say, okay, bring your energy in, right? Pull it back in,
mhm,
bring it in from what the dog is doing and what your son is doing. And that
mhm,
last client, bring it all in. It's like you're plugging all the holes, right?
mhm,
The energy that's leaked out. And
mhm.
then you're back here. Okay. Okay. Now I'm here in my physicality.
I like that expression that you just used too, that have leaked out. I had a coach that used to talk about leaky energy, like with dating.
Absolutely.
Oh, if
Yes.
you're in contact with all of these exes or dates or male interests, is that's actually pulling, like you could see like a string pulling, and how
Absolutely.
much of those strings do you have out versus focusing on yourself? So they wanted you to
Right.
almost like cord cutting, cut all the
Yes.
strings,
Yeah.
pull all that energy back, and you'll have more energy to focus on yourself.
Exactly. Even in our exchange. So I could have all my energy on you. You could have all your energy on me. And then how do I feel if I'm speaking too fast? Or how do I feel if I'm getting anxious? I can't because all my energy's on you.
Mhm,
So, in terms of conflict and reactivity and triggers, the more you can have awareness of your body, you can start to track, oh, there's something brewing. I'm starting to get agitated. And then you can nip it in the bud, so to speak. You don't have to get to the point where it's gone too far and now you're in a rage and you're exploding or you're fighting or shouting.
such good information, just
Mhm.
so powerful. If listeners were gonna take away one thing
Mm.
about your practice, what advice would you offer them?
If we were to take away one thing, I work from the premise of there's nothing wrong with you. Like, there's nothing wrong with you. It's just that we weren't taught some really important skills in terms of connecting with ourselves. And I think that connects so much to the work that you're doing, lighting up your worth. You can't even know your worth if you're so externally focused. So if you really looked at yourself like, okay, there's nothing wrong with me. I'm not broken. I'm not awful. I just missed some things and there's some things that I could learn and integrate and that will give me some skills that I'm lacking. Then we just approach everything in a more compassionate, I think, gentle way. I don't even want to say loving because I think self-love is overrated. You can't go from harshly criticizing yourself to just loving yourself.
Mhm,
It's just too big a jump, right?
mhm, and I don't think our subconscious may know how to do that.
No.
is what
No.
I've been experiencing working with my own stuff and
Yeah.
the clients that I've worked with.
Absolutely.
So
And I
much
love that.
conscious.
I love that you say that because that's where for so many years I did affirmations that were how I wanted to be. But now I can recognize that my body didn't agree. So if I'm saying I'm so beautiful and I'm so loved and my stomach is gripping, that's a disconnect. So that can't work.
Exactly. Exactly. That's so funny that you bring that up is that I have a membership and I will put out every week. There's one about money, like
Mm.
Monday money download belief. I choose to live a rich life, for
Mm.
example. And I ask them as they repeat it for themselves, there's a journal. What are you feeling now in your body?
Great.
Because if you don't stop and talk about or acknowledge that your body
Mhm.
is feeling some resistance, then your body's not going to take that download in no matter how much energetic
Yeah,
work I've done for you and you were wanting to accept it. Your body's not going to accept it.
absolutely. And that's how we also work with trauma. It goes both ways. So if somebody's carrying a lot of difficult emotion,
Mhm.
their body is not able to tolerate those emotions. So we wouldn't now want to say, okay, let's do something to make all those emotions come out at once because their system can't handle that much emotion. So there's like a window of tolerance where we just want to drip feed. Okay, let some of that emotion out and then let's wait. Let some of it out. Okay, let's wait.
Mhm.
And the same is true for pleasurable experiences. Our body also has a low tolerance for pleasure.
Tell me more about that.
I think the most obvious example is if you are out and you listen to a group of women or a group of men or friends talking, they're usually either complaining about something or the talk is often negative. It's very rare. I don't think I've ever experienced it that you hear a group of people sitting around saying, I'm so grateful that I have the life that I have and the husband that I have, and I love my body. We don't do that.
No. Yeah, they seem to be venting to each other about
Yes,
something.
yes. So I'm not saying discount difficult or unpleasant feelings, but we're so far in that extreme that we have a very low tolerance. Sometimes I'll ask my clients, okay, so tell me something that you love about your life or that you love about your body. And they can't do it because they have no tolerance for that energy.
Mhm.
So we have to build. And there's like almost like shame around saying pleasurable things or showing your pleasure.
Mhm. There is. There's
Yeah,
definitely a lot of shame and guilt around it. The
absolutely.
2 lowest vibrating
Yeah,
energies
yeah.
based upon
And
the
I
David Thorne work.
I think that's what we carry as women throughout our whole lives, right? That's what I certainly realized when I went through menopause is, oh, my pleasure doesn't have to be just for the man, it's for me. And that's certainly not how we were raised. Like actually my pleasure is for me and I'm responsible for my pleasure. It has nothing to do with anybody else and it's for me first.
Mhm.
So there's a huge amount of work that we can do as women to embody that. And then it's not, oh, he's a good guy, so I should just be with him because that's good enough. Because I feel good already in myself that if I'm going to be with somebody, it's because I would feel even better, not because they're filling some gap.
That makes a lot of sense because menopause just does change us,
Yeah.
our pleasure, our ability to experience pleasure. I don't really quite understand why it does it. I'm sure it has to do with the hormones,
Yes. Yeah.
but
Nothing feels the same. Your body doesn't respond the same. And we already come from a history of berating ourselves about our bodies. And then just when we think we're getting somewhere, then the game changes. And there's no new manual, right? It's, oh, okay, so now I'm back at square one and I have to figure it out again from a different place.
mhm, yeah. Is there a correlation between having daily pleasures in life? I'm not talking sexual pleasure, but
Mm-hmm.
I'm
Mm-hmm.
talking having and not gratitude, but an actual pleasure, something that gives you
Yes.
joy in your life. How does somebody begin a practice of pleasure?
I love that question. And you could even start with something so simple as you're sitting there in your office. And if you look around your room and you find something that brings you pleasure, whether it's a flower or your favorite mug, you could either look at it. And again, it works through the senses, or you could hold the warm tea mug in your hand and feel the sensation of it. So pleasure comes through the senses, or I have a perfume that I wear every day because I love the scent and it really brings me a lot of pleasure and it informs how I experience the day. So you might have music, so anything sensory.
Mhm.
For me, a big thing is clothing. I hate to wear anything that is tight or restricting or that I don't like the material. It has to be soft. And if it's not, I can't stand to wear it. So it can really be a huge part of everyday life.
That's a really beautiful way to look at our wardrobe too. How do we
Mhm.
feel
Yes.
when you get dressed?
Absolutely. So all of this trying to squish yourself into clothes that don't fit anymore is just get rid of the clothes and only wear what you feel good in
Mhm. Yeah.
because you're not going to have the body that you had when you were 20. It's not going to happen. Or 30 or 40.
Mhm. It just all seems to be moving around, and it's a
Yeah.
continually moving around.
Yeah. And I think we don't do that because if you're willing to recognize that, then you also would deal with some grief because there's a grieving process that nobody speaks about in terms of midlife. It's like you do grieve what you've lost. Like you can grieve your youth, you can grieve things that you haven't done, you can grieve not appreciating the beauty that you were in your 20s and 30s and 40s. You could grieve not having had children if you had wanted them. So there's a lot that we skip over and we just focus on hot flashes and my tummy is big.
Yeah.
And I think there's a much deeper experience to be had as a portal that can take us through to something really amazing.
Wow, you were just talking about that, about the grief of things that maybe you didn't
Mm.
appreciate and everything, and I just felt my whole body heat up. I was like,
Yeah.
"Oh, I haven't thought about the grieving process of being at a
Mhm.
certain point in
Yeah.
your life and maybe choices you've made
Yeah.
that you should allow that experience of grieving, that it's real."
Mhm. Yeah.
Mhm,
Because when we hold on to, I say it's like your body is a container. So the more emotions you hold on to, the less you can fill it. So now if you're full up to here with all the stuff that you don't want to feel, I don't want to
mhm,
feel sad. I don't want to feel angry. I don't want to feel my resentment. I'll just put on my happy face. Then you can't make space for anything new. So the more you empty the grief and the rage, and there's a lot of rage in midlife, the
mhm.
more space you create for pleasure or creativity or other things.
I think we do carry a lot of rage, like you were just saying, and we're not supposed to as ladies, kind of,
Exactly.
uh,
Yeah,
express it or feel it, and I'm sure there is a lot of us who have it stored in our bodies and
absolutely.
don't know how to get rid of it.
No. And I don't even know, without rage, you can't really set boundaries. You can't embody your anger. You can't set boundaries because how do you know what you're upset about, right? So anger is a very powerful emotion that gets a bad rap. And if I'm angry, it means that is really important to me. And if I can identify what that is and why I'm upset, then I can communicate that to you in a way that is a heartfelt boundary, not a harsh criticism.
Hmm. And do you find that anger and resentment are like cousins, or is resentment stuffed down anger?
I would say, yeah, they're very connected. So I wouldn't imagine that somebody's resentful and not angry. They definitely go together.
Mhm,
If, when you're feeling resentment towards another person, it's often because, certainly in partnership, you're wanting them to give you something often that you're not giving yourself.
mm.
And then the resentment creeps in, where you're like, oh, my husband is always going on holidays with his buddies. And then I feel resentful. Okay, why don't I give myself that experience with my friends?
Yeah. Some of us are the ones always going away, and the other ones stay at home.
Exactly.
Some of us
So,
want to travel and the other doesn't necessarily feel that need anymore.
yeah, exactly. Exactly. I think there's a lot that we're not well versed in relationship and in really getting the power of our emotion.
It's some real powerful things for myself and the audience to think about. Like, when you have those other emotions backed up, you really can't expand into. And
No.
I think I've touched on it before because we want to move forward, and you get told, oh, you're thinking too much about the past to move forward or bring in the life that you're creating. But you have to clear some of that as you focus on what you're moving towards. You
Yes,
have to still clear out
of
the
course.
stuff.
Try and put your new wardrobe in a closet that's full of clothes. How is that going to work? You can't. Not that different.
There's not enough room.
No, you got to get rid of the stuff.
Yeah, you gotta get rid of that dress you bought back in 1984. Yeah.
Exactly.
Uh,
Exactly. So you can say what you like about it, but it just cannot work, right?
yeah. Yeah. I love that analogy. Or the shoes.
Exactly.
You can't bring in more
Exactly.
shoes until you get
No,
out the old shoes.
no.
I
So I
think
have a
there's
rule. If I bring something in, something has to go out.
yes, I've been trying that rule, and I can't say that I've been all that successful, but
It's okay.
what I did do before that is I got rid of a lot of clothes.
Great.
And then I thought, okay, nothing new's coming in unless I absolutely love it.
And you feel great in
And
it,
I feel
right?
great in it. Like, I
Yeah,
love the silkiness of my blouse, you know?
exactly.
It
Yeah,
just feels so soft and
amazing.
I feel good in it, so I'm gonna wear it.
Exactly.
So you see it a
And
lot in the podcast.
yeah, but how you speak and how you interact with people from that place of loving how you
Mhm.
feel on the top is different than if you're wearing a scratchy, tight shirt that you're trying to squeeze yourself into because you're pretending to be something you're not, an age that you're not, a shape that you're not.
Yeah, exactly. That whole acceptance, it's what word I would use would probably be peaceful. There's
Mm,
a gentle peace that comes with that. Even as
absolutely.
we're improving, I still love as I'm carrying some, extra weight, when I release it, I'm not losing it because I don't want it to be found, but I am releasing it, but I still love who I am in this moment.
Wonderful.
Beautiful work that you're doing, Linda.
Thank you.
You
Thank you.
know
I really love it. I have to say, even if I won the lottery and I didn't have to work, I wouldn't want to stop working because
mhm,
it's really, it doesn't feel like work.
mhm. Yeah, because you get to really see through that whole journey of
Mm,
how it shows up,
yeah. Yeah.
people living beyond what they thought was possible for themselves.
Yeah. And I think that's always been my passion. If I see somebody that's in pain or suffering and I know a way to help them, I want to share that with them.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Now I want to turn the questions over to the 2 questions I'd love to ask my guests, but the first one
Hmm.
is that I'm a huge believer in music, right?
Me
Music
too.
can get you up and change your mood, you can dance, you can sing, you can car dance, break dance,
Absolutely.
if wherever you're at. I want to know what is your song that really helps you embody yourself and uplift you?
Mhm. It's a hard question. I was thinking, oh gosh, I love music. And there's so many amazing songs out there. And I think the one that kept coming up for me is an old one, showing my age. It's a Steve Winwood song,
Oh,
and it's Higher Love.
I love that song. I that
I
song this
know.
last week. Yeah. It was his comeback song, right?
Yeah. There's something about it that just feels like when I feel stuck in something, that it just calls me out of the drudgery or out of the stuckness into something higher.
Mhm.
And I just feel more elevated and I just get out of my muck and it always makes me move. I think it has also some connection to my past and good memories. It's a real feel good song for me.
Oh, I love when I know the songs.
Yeah.
Definitely know that when that is a really good song.
Yeah. And I
Thank
blast
you.
it really loud and I dance through the house. And it's just, yeah, it's such a feel good song.
Mhm. Great. I'll add that to our playlist. On my
Great.
YouTube channel, I have a playlist of all the
Oh,
songs
wow.
from
Oh,
the
I'll have to
guests.
have a look.
Yeah,
Right.
and it's really a gamut of
I can imagine.
the different genres
Mhm.
of music and words, instrumentals, songs you might know that were popular
Great.
or unknown.
Excellent. Lovely. Add it to my list.
Yeah, it's a good playlist.
Perfect.
Um,
Perfect.
at this stage in your life, with all these different seasons behind you and your
Mm.
experiences and everything that you've done, what would you tell yourself, younger version of yourself, about your own worth from where your perspective is now?
Oh, boy, it's such a big question. Younger self about her worth. That she doesn't have to work hard or try hard to be worthy. She's just worthy by being fully who she is. I think that's really been my journey, just having permission to be.
That's beautiful.
Thank you.
I'm glad that you stepped into yourself.
Me too. That's what I want for all women in this next chapter, that step more fully into who we are now.
Mhm. That is definitely my mission. I feel like we're advocates for other
Yes.
women that we've been through life
Yes.
ourselves and have come out the other side. And life is very different when you own your worth,
Mhm. Absolutely.
even through the challenges. It doesn't all of a
Absolutely.
sudden become all butterflies and rainbows. Those are beautiful to experiences. Even those are different, more colorful, and
Yes.
the colors are brighter.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I'm so thankful you were here, Linda, to share your vision for helping women feel empowered.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Thank you for really also holding the light for women to be more amazing.
Thanks.
Welcome.